Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 1st of December. And, well, just like we talked about the sideways before, this would be, while it seems like a big move, it's relative to the previous bars and pretty much consistent with that. However, the weakness, this is what we were talking about, that as we started to see the magenta pop up, if the weight moved back over it, that would be a signal of continuation. And that happened early on, and I posted about it on our Skype chat, and then boom, it just continued to go. And of course, we were starting the day run up against the ABM yellow, which was at the 63 level. And the high got up to 67, and then as soon as we dipped back below it, it started and began to escalate. And like I said, too, also the 4613, which is the previous algo, we got to that point, blew right through it, and we dipped all the way down here to the 61% Fibonacci line here, with actually the other algo range 4500 being the 50% right now. It's 45.25, and this is still soft. Now, if we get the white MBI over orange, then you can really expect to see something like we saw here. And this is the effect of what we're getting at the beginning stages. It's just the ranges are already larger. It's not too different than some of the bigger moves that took place back at the end of July and that. But this seems to be a bit more effective as far as range goes and the continuation on it. Before everything was just backed up and then moved on. There's still plenty of range for this to go, so by no means are bulls out of the word trouble, so to speak. It's interesting because we've had now a couple of weeks in a row here of the big talk about options being the favorite play, and now you're looking at a second week in a row of call options just being wiped out. That's significant, and certainly has a material impact because all of those call purchasing forced a lot of the underlying buying, and as soon as that gets erased and all that gamma fades, they sell, and because there's no reason to hold it if they don't need to. And sure enough, that could be adding to the situation, and whether or not they'll be back for more on the dips, we will see. But for now, that's the story. NASDAQ far better off, and it was leading it prior to it. You can see big difference here, hasn't quite crossed. If we don't get a congruency there, we could see a continuation of that variation. What was consistent with both was the DOC spread, which was where cyan moves above the red. You know, long-term buyers in red, mid-term buyers in the green, all fading at the same time. And what I look for a transition on that would be to see orange cross below the steel. And when that takes place, then we would expect any down move to cease at that point. We would expect a turnaround bull side of that setup. The euro, again, on that weakness, people flee a little bit quicker, and that propped up the euro a bit. And we're already in a situation where it already had the dip below orange here of the red DOC. So it was already pivoting to the upside. That doesn't mean it's going to survive. It's not all that healthy a move anyway. And of course, like we talked about, sometimes you get a spike in the gold, but then when you have to liquidate, it gets ugly, and that's exactly the effect we got. Not to mention the numbers for Black Friday came, as well as the Cyber Monday, and they weren't great. In fact, it was the first lower Cyber Monday, I think, ever. So it's an indication that there's some issues underlying. We've been seeing it play out for the last several months as prices and inflation have just been discounted as transitory, and it has an impact. And flight to cash, so yields continuing to plummet, and that doesn't help the market because it's just money moving to the sidelines. And then from a Bitcoin standpoint, really was unable to do anything, which was interesting because Ethereum, while it made its dip, it started to build back and held up fairly nicely, and certainly outperforming what Bitcoin has been doing significantly. And you gotta wonder whether some of that's a function of its price or just the increase in volume is huge relative to what we see from Bitcoin. action. From a 50K standpoint, well, the sell started back the other day, towards the end of the day, but that 46.50 range, we dipped down, we came back up, it was looking okay right here with the magenta, but once that magenta dipped below yellow NBI and the white was over it, that's a little ugly, and we were looking for at least a dip to the 23, if not a little bit more, and then once that started, it began to carry through as the white NBI stayed, and then we expected a little bit more of a pop once the magenta got back over. Only thing is we really didn't have a DOC steel reset, even though we were getting the dips of orange. It was pretty much staying in a continuation mode, and that's literally how it went, and just evening back up with that same scenario, but likewise again, still no steel reset. From a 5K standpoint, we had a lot of activity, and this was more like the normalized days, and there was a lot of movement, which was really nice. So this was the post-market had positive extremes, closing at the end of the day, and then we ended up with our little short setup. I thought we might stop a little bit lower at the 57 from the pop, but we made one extra little pop before. Beautiful DOC spread right here where that cyan is above the red and at the 0 level, so all beautiful combinations, and that just marked the algo activity for the sell. And I had already previously marked this 4602, which was the positive extreme that led to the initial turnaround move at the beginning of it, and we had that marked from before. It's a pretty good size gap between where this started before you got to that, and then the lowest mark on that positive extreme was the very first bar at 45.88, and we literally just dipped slightly below it, and boom, they closed right above it and then took off from there. But at that point the damage was done, and we started a variety of selling that. We got a little pre-market activity that started to kind of build a little upside, and then when the market started, there was a nice little build for a little bit, and every time we had a little bit of sell, they were buying that up, and did it a couple of times, and then we made another move. But we started making positive extremes, and I started marking them as they were going, because every time you get that, when you start seeing positive extremes popping up there, you know that those are your retrace values. And so as soon as a couple of those sells came in, you could see what the range was going to be on them, and it was really nice from that aspect. And then even on the turnaround pop, again, another set of positive extremes, and boom, the selling went straight to it, and then really couldn't capture much activity from that as far as positive. I mean, the pivots on the magenta were very low. Usually you look for these strong moves where it's just a continuous rise all the way above. But in this case, we started getting little pivots. Whenever I see pivots that are below the white line here, which is at 25, I like to attack them, particularly the ones where you get the magenta pivot and white crosses above. And it's sort of like that same effect of crossing that we look for, the DOC. Orange crossing above and steel crossing under cyan. At this point, it was just before it crossed below green in that, and that began what was the fall that was not going to stop. And look at every single one of these moves here was all with red rising over, so it really didn't pose much of a risk as far as a turnaround move. And then finally we got towards the end of it here, and we started to go from that deep red shakeout to build, and that's usually where you can catch a bid. This one was interesting because we had the magenta finally leading going into it, and then white popped above, and things looked like it might stay weak, but then we get this immediate pivot, and once that pivoted back up, and you had the continuation of yellow going higher. That was the separation, and it was confirmed once white dipped below red there, and that was enough for another bounce back. It was pretty short-lived, though, because we ended up getting the dark magenta candle again for the cell configuration and the crossover, and that led to a whole move to new lows. And then again, just we kept doing the same thing, build back a little bit, sell off, another rise. And then as we came to the final act, we had this nice little move up. All these positive extremes started popping up. It began right up in here at the 88 level, and we moved slightly up above it before, and then we got the dark magenta there right after the little deep red, which was right back at the algo level. I was trading it short just above the algo level, just for the bonus of it, and by that point we had the clean DOC spread that took place, and once that DOC spread started, that led to the big drop candle, and then that was lights out. We went straight back to the zero, which was interesting. Wasn't necessary, even though we had the spikes of white. Usually you want those to be a little bit higher, like in this case where it's a little bit up, and so when this pop came, it was easy to attack that on that same thing. Magenta dipping back below, particularly if it goes below the 25, I like to look for with the white crossing above, and it was just before the cross of orange and steel. That happens the next bar, but I like that signal. It's very nice, and that led to a nice move lower. And then we got the oversold deep turnaround, starting to build. This is one of those where it's like I've already covered at this particular point early, and I'm just looking to see if at the 23% I'm going to get sell configuration or buy. And in this particular case, we ended up with the white popping above, but we also had green DOC over, so I wasn't willing to attack that one just yet. When the magenta candle came in, it was good for a little thing with the turnaround pop here for the magenta. And it's always important to play close attention when those things meet, and then you get the crossovers and versus this spidering effect where you dip below and the other one comes up. You know that you're going to catch a bid on those setups, and that's exactly what happened. This is all aftermarket. So as soon as the market closed, there was nice little buy setup programs jumped in there. They're on positive extremes, starting with right here at the 68 level, and we ended up with a couple of others at the 74. So I would expect those to probably get some action going back to them when it looks like it, but at this particular point, still positive. If this breaks down a little bit further, though, that would probably fill those positive extremes in the post-market. For the middle of the week, pretty exciting stuff is going to be taking place. I mean, we're only 2 days in, so pretty exciting stuff post-holiday. Not exactly the, everyone kept talking about the Christmas rally. Doesn't mean you can't have it, it just is certainly taken an interesting route to all that positivity that supposedly was out there. But I think that option configuration that I was talking about earlier has certainly had a big play on the market early on, and just doesn't take but a couple of weeks of this kind of irregularity. I mean, it started before Thanksgiving week, the week of Thanksgiving, now the start of this week. So we'll see if there's going to be a repurchase to drive things back up. I mean, we're not that far off. I mean, 100 points or even 70 points at this particular stage, given where the market is, represents a pretty small fraction compared to what it used to be. As always, though, I will be sitting at the indicators. Look for that. Trade well. We'll talk again later.